and welcome to Trust Talks, the inaugural InsurTech Insights podcast hosted by ClearSpeed. I'm your host, Danny Ngsikwan. Trust Talks is a podcast about, you guessed it, trust in the context of today's insurance landscape. Consumer trust in the industry is waning, so what can be done to rebuild it, particularly in perhaps the most challenging and complex environment within which to maintain profitability? We're asking senior insurance leaders for their perspectives on why trust is critical today and for their real-talk views on what's happening in the industry. Joining us is Sarah Jacobs, SVP Personal Lines Product and Underwriting at Nationwide. Sarah's worked in insurance and with Nationwide for over 25 years, which is sure to bring a great perspective to our conversation. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Let's get right into it. We've got some questions for you. Insurance is a for-profit industry. Where do you see money being left on the table, and what can we do to address this?
And so it's interesting because I think that question kind of is a starting point where we talk about trust. Maybe runs the risk a little bit of feeding into some of the narrative that is actually causing some of the mistrust in the first place. So that narrative that maybe insurance companies are out to make a profit at all costs, and maybe even at the expense of delivering on the promises that they make to customers. And I categorically don't believe that to be true, right? So I'm a big believer in the noble purpose that insurance serves in society and in protecting customers. And that's really what motivates me every day. And I can say that about all the people that I work with as well. So maybe I want to just take the liberty to reframe the question a little bit into how can we remove cost from the insurance equation? And because ultimately, I think if we can address the affordability and availability of insurance and some of the drivers of that, that's ultimately how we can help get risk management and insurance back to that sort of risk pooling in its truest sense, and ultimately pass that benefit on to the customer in the form of better pricing and better coverage. Now, I know that sounds like a big thing, and we're talking about fundamentally shifting some of how the market operates. But I think a lot of the solution starts with simple things like transparency and communication, education, and collaboration. So if you reframe the question to how can we work together to remove unnecessary or fraudulent costs from the insurance equation, it really becomes clear how you can actually partner with customers, with agents, across the industry, with legislators and regulators to do that. So if you think about it, how can we help customers understand simple things that they can do to help better protect their homes or exhibit safe driving behaviors? How do we work with agents to help better educate customers on how things like fraudulent roof claims, how those kind of costs actually get passed back to them in their insurance costs? How do we partner as industry carriers and across the industry to address things like legal system abuse more systemically? How do we lean into building codes and building more resilient homes? How do we influence that together? So just really thinking about if we can get cost out of the equation, that ultimately helps solve some of the drivers, and that benefit goes back to the customer. And I think there's also sort of the innovation front to that, right? There's the opportunity to think beyond the indemnity of our products, just the traditional indemnity products, and think about how can we meet those changing customer needs in new ways. So things like parametric insurance and warranties and maintenance, and just thinking more holistically about how to solve customer needs. So I think there's a lot of exciting possibilities. And yeah, that's where we spend a lot of time and focus, even as we're sort of navigating the challenges.
Absolutely. So let me ask you a question, Sarah. I mean, completely agree with what you've said there, taking the cost out of the equation because that does get passed on to the customer. These are fundamental, super important. There does seem to be, perhaps, some people would say an inertia with the industry a little bit in terms of, making these shifts. Like, for example, on the cost of fraud, maybe an accepted perception that, 10% of claims are fraudulent, and that's okay, but it's not, So I guess how can we get past that inertia as an industry and start to make some of these changes that you've so eloquently shared?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. And I think it goes beyond sort of buzz and just talking about it. And again, some of these are big problems. So a single person, a single carrier can't change them alone. So I do think there's just a lot of opportunity to just think differently about how we influence and collaborate across the industry to influence some of those things. I do also think technology offers some great opportunities to address those, again, more systemically and holistically.
Yeah.
So again, if we are kind of all talking about the challenges and the problems and the opportunities together, we've got some amazing technology vendors and partners out there that are really trying to help us solve business needs. And so helping them understand the challenge of fraud and how can we get at that more systemically, I think is one example.
The technology question is interesting because, I think there's an opportunity for everyone to integrate technology more seamlessly into what they're doing. What do you think about when you're making those technology decisions? Like, are you looking at the outcomes? Are you looking at solving a particular problem? And then there's also that buzz, AI everything. Like,
Yeah.
what are some of the things you think about?
Yeah. So I think it's really important to get clear on the business problem that you're trying to solve. But I think it's also really important, especially in this environment, sort of mistrust with the industry, to think about it from an outside-in perspective, from a customer perspective, because there are lots of solutions and things that we can do to help solve the insurance math equation. But how is that going to feel to the customer? That transparency and that control is just, I think, such an important piece of helping bring customers along on that journey. So that's been one of the things that we really look at is how does this problem feel from the customer's perspective? Why are they behaving a certain way? What's driving and motivating that behavior? And we look for technology solutions that, yes, help address that problem, but that really create that seamless experience and transparency for the customer.
Yeah.
That's really where you get the win and where you start to build trust. You get the accuracy of input, but you get the customer sort of along on that journey.
Yes, and the experience as well. I mean, the two-way trust relationship, because consumers need to trust their insurers that they're going to do the thing that they promised to do. But also, I mean, on the profit side and the fraud side, insurers need to trust their customers too, in a way. And right now, if you think about some aspects of the experience, you're putting even genuine customers sometimes through this whole shebang of things where perhaps they don't need to go through that. So how can you improve that experience? And, that was related to one of the questions here that we were going to talk about. Like, what if you and your role or insurer at large had a way to more confidently trust the information, that they're getting from their customers, and how might that impact all of your processes, your people, your business?
Yeah. And I do think that to a large extent, that shift is already happening, right? There's already so many ways that we are leveraging technology to improve that experience, to reduce the intrusive questions that we have to ask in the underwriting process, and where we can really feel confident in that information that we're using and to underwrite the risk. So I do think that's already happening, but there are some touch points that are still really challenging for agents, for customers, and for insurers. So one great example is age of roof, right? That's a big topic in the industry. It's really big in rating. It's really big in how you settle claims. And we're all sort of wrestling with this. You've got a fraud component in there, right, from a roofing kind of contractor perspective a little bit. And so, but genuinely, I think most people aren't trying to be dishonest with that roof age information. They just honestly don't know. But that's a great example where there's a lot of vendors and technology sort of really trying to figure out how to solve that problem. Again, ultimately for the customer's benefit, because if we can rate on that accurately and underwrite and settle claims on that accurately, that's ultimately to their benefit as well. So looking at how can you use aerial imagery and AI to improve that roof age accuracy. We also had some really fascinating conversations with IVHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, around how we could partner with shingle manufacturers, some claims technology that's already in the market, and aerial imagery to actually pinpoint the shingle age.
Yeah.
So again, thinking about how technology can really help that. Another great example, I think, is with self-inspections. We're piloting self-inspection technology, and you think about that experience for the customer, it's a lot less disruptive for them to inspect and use an app that can sort of help them just walk around their home and take pictures of what we need to see, a lot less disruptive. for the customer.
Yep.
It also actually gives us a lot more accuracy and confidence in that input. Obviously, on the claims process, for years we've been using photos and things in that process, but there's that technology is rapidly advancing, and I just think those are all great examples of where it's already there. There's momentum.
Yeah.
And if we really think about it from the customer's perspective, how do we improve it for them from an experience and a transparency perspective, that ultimately also helps the carriers. It helps the whole mechanism operate more smoothly, and that, that benefits the customer in the long run as well.
Absolutely. It's, you're kind of feeding into the consumer behavior that exists today, with Amazon, Netflix, like all consumerizing that experience further for the customer. Let's close with a question. If there's one thing you could implore to industry leaders listening, what would it be?
Yeah. So I don't know that I need to implore, because I'm pretty sure we're all aware of some of the challenges and really motivated, to solve them. But I do think that while obviously we all want to maintain a competitive advantage, we are facing some really systemic, big problems that we can really only solve together. And so I think that would probably be my challenge, is how do we double down on some of those efforts to address those together? I think if I had to pick one thing right now that I would kind of ask us to work on together, I think the time is really right on influencing building codes and building back more resilient claims. So there's just been so many examples in the media and so much opportunity to sort of dig into that and use some of that recent experience, to help educate customers, but really influence at that kind of local community level. So that's something where IBHS is a great partner, but I would love to see us kind of across the industry lean into that together.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sarah, so much for being here, and thank you for your perspective.
All right. Thanks for having me.